Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining today's webinar. Today's webinar is implementing Primavera Unifier in an owner, CM, or GC environment. Today's webinar is going to be presented by two parties, Don McNatty and Lim Tan. We have a couple of items that we want to go over before we get started. First, all calls will be muted in order to preserve the quality of the audio for all attendees, as we are recording this webinar, and all attendees and registrants will receive a copy of today's recording. If at any time during the presentation that you have a question that you would like to ask in the presentation, there is a box in the right-hand side of your screen for questions. You can submit those questions, and time permitting, we will put the questions out for answers. We will also put together a follow-up email to include all questions and answers, a copy of the slideshow presentation, and a copy of the recording of today's webinar. We're going to get started, and our first presenter is going to be Don McNatty.
Good morning. Let me just get right to the agenda here. I want to try and get through the slides as quickly as we can so that Lim has more time to actually show you how to set up shells and business processes within Unifier itself. This is part of what we call the Unifier webinar series. It's a series of 5 or 6 webinars that we're going to put on through January of 2014 on Unifier. I'm going to do a brief overview of Unifier. Not as many slides as we've done in the past. A lot of people have seen those. But I want to talk about the fundamentals of Unifier implementations and how your perspective or your deployment perspective is going to impact key configuration decisions that you need to make early on in the implementation. And Lim is going to go into Unifier 913 hosted in our MLM data center and show you how some of these configuration elements are set up when deploying Unifier. So we'll talk, after he's done, we'll review some of the issues with PM and CM deployments because they can be different than owner GC deployments, and I'll get into some details on some of the differences between them. So this month we're going to talk about implementing Unifier in an owner, PMCM, or GC, General Contractor environment. Next month we'll be reviewing the cost and schedule capability within Unifier. We've actually been able to call P6 web service commands from the Unifier workflows, which has some interesting possibilities to it. So hopefully we'll have something to show you on that next month. And don't forget that this webinar and all previous webinars, you can go to our website under Resources, Webinars, and you can actually find recordings of these previous webinars. Now, how does Unifier fit in? Well, this slide pretty much says it all, that when you combine Unifier and P6, you've got the entire project life cycle, everything that you need to do to plan, build, and operate facilities, infrastructure, whatever. This is the platform. These tools are going to come much closer together as we see new releases coming from Oracle over the coming years. We'll keep you abreast of roadmap information. Collaborate next April is, I'm sure, going to have a lot of information on Unifier, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the very end of this. Okay, so it does give you control across the entire life cycle of the project, automates business processes and workflows, and with being a complete web service driven environment, makes it a lot easier to integrate with analytic tools, ERP, and financial systems. So what is Unifier? Well, cloud-based means it runs on the web. It's a project information management solution. So you can see I've got some tabs up here. I've got my navigator on the left side. The heart of it is the document manager, where you get to define what your folder structure looks like. You have business processes that drive how to get information into those folders. These business processes are logs in themselves that keep a record of every business process that has been executed on the project. Right, the foundation of it is the workflows. This is a very simple workflow of creating a document, sending it for approval, revising it, sending it back, approving it, and that's the end of the workflow. Every step of that is stored within the system. It can be automated. You define the business rules, accountability, visibility, who has access, who sees what on the tool. Now, the user interface, at each step of the business process, you've got a form that consists of detailed information about this particular business process, action items, who you're sending it to, and then you've got details. In this particular one, which is for a work order, I can see it, there's some labor and material tab here that provides some detail. And the way the process works is in the upper right corner you select your workflow action, who it's going to go to, and this is part of your implementation configuration, is defining groups, people that may have access to create, different people may have access for reviewing, and still others for approving. And you get to pick from those lists and send it to them. And it goes to them through email, and I'll show you interacting with the email in just a minute. Now, the benefits are that you get real-time visibility to your project data. It automates your business processes. You have controlled access to information. Permissions can be set right down to the field level of what people can access and see within the system. And most of all, there's a complete audit trail of every step of the process, who did what and when. The pre-configured packages, there's 3 of them that were posted in August by Oracle, and what we're going to focus on is the tools that we would primarily use for managing a capital construction project, which would be Unifier Cost Control and Project Delivery Management. Now, Project Delivery Management has all of the traditional business processes that we're used to with RFIs, meeting minutes, daily reports, and so forth. There are audit logs that you can see and track the processes in a log and get more detailed audit reports. You can see it's somewhat of a graphic environment here with dashboards and the navigator. If I'm on an individual record, like a contract, I can pull up a screen that gives me what we call the spider web, which shows all documents that are related to this. They're also listed on this log over here on the right, and I can just double-click on that log and go right to a particular document to get more information. There is a mobile application with Unifier. Runs great on an iPad. I've run it on the Microsoft Surface Pro, so you do have mobile functionality right out of the box with this. Cost controls, budgets, forecasts, commitments, changes. There's also a funding worksheet for owners that need to track their various sources of funding. If you look at this cost sheet, you'll notice that these are all links that are clickable, that take you down to lower levels of detail of what's behind those numbers. This isn't just a spreadsheet that you plug numbers into. There are business processes and workflows that define what goes into those, into the cost worksheet. And you can integrate the cost with the schedule worksheet, for instance, to provide schedule-driven cash flow forecasting, which I'll show you in just a minute. Every one of these logs that comes with the predefined packages also has reports that are related to it. These are called user-defined reports. They can be modified. They work within Unifier and do not require you to have BI Publisher. However, if you want to create reports beyond what's here, then BI Publisher is the tool that Oracle provides for doing this. Some of you existing Unifier users know that you can also use other third-party tools that you may already have on hand to do custom reporting with this. Now here's an interactive example where, working from my business processes, I execute a workflow. The workflow moves through its steps. In its different points in the steps, it might update the cost sheet. It can relate to the schedule sheet. It can create a original document that you can use for getting wet signatures on. This doesn't come with the out-of-the-box business processes that they ship, but they can be created, and you define how you want your forms to look. And so that the cost sheet and the schedule can come together to drive the cash flow. So that was an example of how the system is interactive. Now, one of the things that I have found to be especially useful in working with Unifier is the way that it interacts through your email. So in this example, a contract has been written and sent to me for approval. I can see information on this, and I have some options down here, and I'll just blow those up a little bit so that you can see. So I can click from the email, and it will take me right into Unifier, where I can log in and take action on a workflow. Or I can interact with the workflow right here by approving it, sending it for revision, or just flat out rejecting it. And when I do that, it will open up an email message that has a subject line that's obviously pre-configured as a command. When it goes back into Unifier, that it will execute the command, approve the contract, or take the next step to send it for revision. And any text that you put in the body of the email, any attachments that you include with your response along with the original document will be stored in the log with the record in part of the audit trail. And the audit trail is pretty robust. Here's an example of an audit trail where a workflow was begun, who it was sent to, and I can see various modifications as they went on over the life of this workflow. And I can click on any one of those and get the details of what the old value was, what the new value is, who changed it, and when it happened. So that's something that we've been asking for from our project management information systems for quite some time. The fundamentals of Unifier implementations are that everyone is different, and even with the standard packages, you will end up doing some modifications to move forward into a completed deployment. Unifier can be unforgiving. Some of the choices that you make very early on in your deployment can't be changed, and there are some elements of it that once you create them, they can't be deleted. They can be made inactive. But one of the things that it does, Unifier does do, is it provides a staging in a production environment. And so the process is that you build, test, and validate business processes, forms, and reports in the staging environment, and then you move them to the production environment so that your production environment is kept very clean and not cluttered with a lot of things that you don't necessarily need there. Okay, so consider the standard packages that come from Oracle as a starting point, and you'll move forward from there. As far as licensing goes, anyone working internally in Unifier, of course, would need a license, but also external users who may submit, review, or approve documents. I am on full screen. They're seeing this on the right? Okay. Hold on a second. Looks like we've got a... Let me try to change this. Display settings, swap. See if this is what they see now. Okay, Bill just came in and told me that what you were seeing on the screen was different than what I thought you were seeing. We're good? Only took us 17 slides to catch that. Okay. Let me move over here. Okay. So we're talking about licensing. So if you want contractors or subcontractors to submit documents into Unifier, they will need licenses. And also, if all someone's going to do is interact through the email the way I showed on a previous screen, they will also need to have a Unifier license. So that was one of the questions that came up in a previous discussion on Unifier. Lim is going to get into shells. Shells can be many things in Unifier, and you really need to plan how you're going to use them. You know, they can be projects, or they could just be a collection of information that is gathered in one place for managing it easier. So shells can also be hierarchical. So, you know, in one way, a shell might be like a tab, a folder that collects projects in it. And Lim will show you some examples of that in the general contractor demonstration environment he'll be working with. Shells can accumulate and roll up costs. They're defined in the U designer. You know, they're not all projects, so they're not time-bound. They don't have a start and a finish dates. And any roll-ups are based on the hierarchy of the shells themselves. There's no limits on the number of shells you can have in one database, but there are limits, for instance, on the tabs that you can show across the top of the screen. I think the limit is 6. Administration is a lot more complex in Unifier than anything else that we've dealt with. There's a site administrator who has responsibility for creating the company, which is the sponsor, and Unifier has only one main company. So if it's an owner or a GC or a construction manager, that's the sponsoring company is the way that we look at it. The site administrator creates company users, partner users, which are people that would log into and participate in the system and manage licenses and installs any ancillary applications that go with Unifier. Now the company administrator goes a bit beyond the site administrator to, you know, creates the programs, shells, maintains company level group permissions and users, can configure business processes and codes, user defined reports. And it's still at a lower level is the project administrator, which, you know, based on the security, I could have hundreds of projects in Unifier, but I log in and I only see one of them, but I'm the administrator for that one, and I can control things within that project itself. So how you're going to administrate Unifier is an important concept for you to be thinking about, because what you're getting with Unifier is really it's a chassis, it's an engine, it's a starting point for the system that you're going to create. Oracle provides the base packages for capital planning, project delivery, cost control, which brings you some pre-built information in, but you need to then take it from there to come up with your finished product. And that's where your perspectives come in, because owners have different perspectives than GCs. A program or construction manager may have an owner's perspective. They may have a perspective similar to a GC if they're a construction manager managing multiple projects for multiple clients. But let's just take a look at owners, what owners want. They want a record or a copy of anything that relates to their project in one place so that the history is completely accessible. An audit trail of project-related actions in history. You know, this is all the ideal solution for an owner. These are the things that they want on all their projects. One location, everything's together, makes integration with finance a lot easier. Design and construction documents being available to the facility maintenance team. Again, this is a full life cycle solution. So everything that's in Unifier during the design and construction phase is available down the line to the facilities team. Tracking funding, doing planning, periodic financial planning, tying it to actual project plans and schedules, looking out into the future. These are all things that the system needs to support, and these are things that Unifier does support. Receiving or being able to log incoming documents and record all comments, keep those comments secure for only the people that need to see them, and also meet your security and data access requirements. And some of our clients have some very strict security requirements that need to be adhered to on their projects. Now, General Contractor also wants all relevant project information. However, they're usually limited to how much they can get based on the contractual environment that they're working in. They need to support multiple clients or projects, ideally from one environment, so that they're able to manage costs and resources across all of their projects. Sorry, the screen migrated on me. They want to manage their subs and suppliers across all projects. Another reason to have all projects in one central location, and also to be able to get cash flow that goes across all of the projects, not just individual projects for financial planning. You need to log, receive and log incoming documents. You can receive documents via email and take them into Unifier, or have like a subcontractor actually submit an RFI to you through a fairly simple to use web screen. Okay, now when you're doing different projects for different clients, oftentimes the clients will have different business processes that they want you to adapt to. And with Unifier, my business processes can be different from project to project. So that's an important thing to remember about Unifier. Now with program and construction managers, okay, your needs might be conflicting, because if you're a program manager and it's a large program with a lot of projects, you're probably going to have the same requirements as an owner because you're functioning as an extension of the owner's team. Now, if I'm a construction manager managing 1 or 2 projects for 2, 3, 4 different clients, then my model is going to be very similar to the general contractors, where you've got multiple clients within the same system, and you want to have everything together in one system so that you can manage your resources and your costs across all of your ongoing projects. Okay, but there are some conflicts that you run into there. You may want to consider a dedicated separate deployment for each owner or client if it's a large, like a program level. We have one of our clients that we've got 12 different deployments of contract management, because when they tried to do one central deployment across all of their projects, their IT department could not keep up with the needs of each individual project, and the fact that some projects needed to do things differently or couldn't move to a different version, although other projects did. And so what we did is we took all of that, split it into individual deployments, And so, we've got people still running contract management at 11, and, the project might be over this year, next year, and it goes down and out, and their new projects are starting up on contract management 14 or Unifier, depending on the kind of a project. Okay. The other thing that the separate deployments make simple is for discovery and ensuring that all of the data is kept separate and secure. Okay. P6 supports multiple databases, and a lot of people will have a database for each client in their P6 deployment. Unifier does not support that with version 9.13. So here's a deployment perspective from an owner. Everything within this box here, I can assume that I can collect, maybe not so much from my outside agencies. They may not participate in the system, but anything that they send in, we can log in and get that into the system. Contractually, I might not have visibility to communications with subs and vendors. Depends on how you're contracting for the work, whether the subs and vendors would be included in the owner's environment or not. A general contractor, based on contractual relationships, is going to get communications, interactions directly with different parties. However, a submittal or an RFI goes into an owner, and there's going to be multiple communications between the owner and other parties about that document, and the GC would not necessarily have access to that information. So this is why I say that deployment perspectives can change, alter how you want the business processes to work. Primarily driven by contract requirements. If you have it in the contract that someone must participate or submit documents to you through Unifier, then you're more likely to capture their information. If you don't have a contractual relationship with an external party, you may have to take emails received from them and then incorporate them into Unifier. Unifier stores all of the forms it creates and attachments that you attach to a business process on the server. You can put a repository underneath Unifier, such as SharePoint or UCM. A lot of clients are doing that, not a lot, but a few are, where they have like SharePoint underneath contract management, and then they let people have access to SharePoint. You do that, you allow direct access, you're going to be bypassing the security and the audit trail capability of the software, so it's not something outside direct access to the repository is not something that we recommend. Here's an example of an RFI workflow for an owner. This is a mock-up of a Unifier business or workflow that was done in PowerPoint for documentation purposes. And so, as an owner, contractor may log in, attach a subcontractor's RFI, send it in for response, you check it over, you accept it, you send it back for clarification. If there's a change required, the RFI business process can automatically create a risk or an issue for you, send it out for technical review, final review, submit a final response. When I'm doing that, if it's going to result in a change, I can also have it automatically send a request for proposal to the contractor as my response to the RFI. Now, a general contractor, on the other hand, may receive an RFI from a sub. An internal person within the GC's environment might create the RFI. Make sure that the RFI is clear before sending it on to an owner for external review. Again, any comments that are going on in the owner's or the external party's environment, you're not going to have access to. Okay, and the same thing, when the answer comes back, if it's going to require a change, the business process can automatically create a PCO or whatever follow-on document you would expect to be part of your process. So there's some key configuration decisions that you need to make early on. Who's the company or the sponsor, the owner of the Unifier database? How to structure the tabs, which is a type of a shell, how the administration is going to be set up with the 3 levels of administration, finalizing any data definitions, data cubes. All of these may need to be changed as part of your workflow. And right now, Dan, I wanted to let you switch this over to Lim, and Lim can go and do the live part of this.
Thank you, Don. Okay, so I'm going to be giving a brief overview of 3 areas. The setting up of the 2 different demo environments that we have, the owner environment and the GC environment. Going to be looking at the administration and user access, and I'm also going to be running through the modified GC RFI workflow. Very quickly, if we are making a comparison with PCM, PCM is a fairly straightforward setup process in comparison to Unifier. Once you have the project set up, there's a set number of predefined modules. Access to these modules are controlled by the access templates. Users are then granted the access to the projects through their individual user accounts. And you have administration accounts that have full rights to everything in the system. So we know to get PCM up and running quickly is a fairly straightforward process. Unifier, to a degree, does use similar principles, but does require much more planning, design, and configuration. Okay. Before we actually look at the environments themselves, how do we get the company in? What I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as the site administrator, which I'm going to do now. Oh, and I have it. I'm already logged in. This is the site administrator's view, and this is where he would create the sponsor company. You can see I'm actually the site administrator for the GC. If I open it up, let me just log in again. Okay, so I'm the site administrator for the GC environment. So the first company that would be set up is the GC company. You can see from this general tab that we have here, it's defaulted to be the owner of the environment. Another part of the site administrator's role is to actually add the partner companies. And you can see here we already have a few already set up. In addition, as Don had mentioned, this is where you would install the different base product applications. Here we have the cost control, capital planning, and the project delivery management. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at the owner environment that we had, and you saw this from the last webinar. So what we want to do here is basically utilize the base product functionality from the applications that were installed. This is a good starting point, and you can obviously modify the environment to suit your needs. In this case, we have one shell hierarchy. So as Don had mentioned, you can create a shell hierarchy. It could be the organization structure, it could be business unit structure, it could be operational structure, and you would build a shell hierarchy which would encompass that. The base product has at its top level a single instance shell type called all projects, and what you would have below is a shell type, in this case it's called projects, which is where you'd actually create the individual projects. You can see here we did make a slight modification where we included a new field called portfolio group, and we also modified slightly the values for the project type. This was for reporting purposes. So how did we get this hierarchy? If I go to the company workspace, go to administration mode, I go to configuration, shell manager, and we have again the anchor shell, the top shell, which is all projects. Go to the Organize tab, and you can see here this is the shell type projects, which is where you saw those individual project instances, and this is a subshell of the all projects shell, which is represented as the tab. So as I was saying here, what we wanted to do is keep it with the base product functionality. Again, just to reiterate, those project instances are these which you create underneath the All Projects tab. I'm now going to move to the GC environment, which is a slightly more modification. Just logging in. So as I said before, this is again using the base product functionality, but here we have modified it. You can see at the top we have 3 tabs: Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and New York, which reflect, you could say, regional offices. We wanted this demo set up to allow a simple way to be able to get to the projects quickly. You can see here, if I select Los Angeles, we have 2 projects. Philadelphia office has 1 project, and similarly for New York has another. Now these tabs, in terms of shell hierarchies, they're 3 separate shell hierarchies. Again, this was so that we can have easy access to the projects by selecting the tab, and the project will be directly below. You can have up to 4 anchor tabs above, so we would have an allowance for an extra regional office if we wanted to. We're just working with 3. Just very quickly, you can see that we have actually renamed the company workspace to the GC name. So how did we get to show those tabs? Well, what we need to do again, we need to keep within the company workspace, Acme Construction. We need to go to administration mode. We go to configuration, and you can see we do have a navigation tabs node. If I select it, this will display all the top level anchor shells that are available to be represented as tabs at the top. It does take a little bit of time for the data to display. And there you have it. We have, by default, you're always going to see the company workspace tab. We have Los Angeles, Philadelphia, New York. I have my own, which is don't have permissions to see, and we have the projects, which is the subshells. You have the ability to reorder as well. Okay, so how did we get the shell hierarchies set up? If you remember from the last webinar, UDesign is where we design all the objects and modules. In this case, we're going to look at the shell manager. And you can see these are all the shells that have been designed. The first four, all projects, Los Angeles, New York, and Philadelphia, as I said, are the anchor shells, so they're the top level shells. The project's shell, or rather shell type, is the way that you can create shell instances that sit under those shells. In order to actually make a change, we'll just select Los Angeles as an example. Just like the business processes, you would select back to draft, or it would be in draft mode if you're designing it for the first time. Double-clicking to open it, just so you can see when I was talking about the being a top-level shell and anchor shell, you can see where it says shell instance is single. If I go to the detail form, this is the attribute form for the shell type. This is the available information for this shell type. Where we made a change is we now, before it used to be called project number and project name, and now we have office number and office name. And these are data elements that we created in the data structure setup node. once you've made the correct change in terms of the information that you wanted stored in the attribute form and you're ready to test, you would check it back to complete, and then it would be ready to deploy into your use stage environment. The way that the shell hierarchy is created, similar to in the owner environment, is again through the configuration. In the owner environment, we just had the all projects shell type, which was the top shell, the tab, and then you had the projects shell type, which was a subshell below that. How we've got it set up here is we have the anchor shells, so the Los Angeles, New York, Philadelphia, and under each one we are still utilizing the project shell, which is now a subshell under Los Angeles. That's also the same for New York and for Philadelphia. Okay, so Don had mentioned the 3 roles. You had seen very briefly the site administrator environment. You also had the company administrator, and you also had the program shell administrator. Now, administration for large deployments could also potentially have a business process and data structure administrator. This is obviously based on the number of business processes that you have as part of your environment. Of course, it is possible to have just one administrator responsible for everything. However, the learning curve is steep, and to take on board all the responsibilities at once is quite a big undertaking. So how do Unifier users get access to what they need? How does the administration set that up? Well, as you know, every single piece of user functionality is controlled by permissions. Any new functionality also creates new permissions. Now again, I'm going to go to what is called the access control, if you remember from the last webinar, and this gives you an outline of all the different functional modules and where you have to set permissions. So as an example, company-sponsored shells, which are the shells that you've created as part of the shell hierarchy, you would set permissions to users, or in this case, it's groups. So if I just go into one, the project administrators, you can see this is how they're setting, how to set the permissions for just this one shell. So as I was saying, with new functionality creates new permissions. If we were to create new projects, they would each have a new set of permissions. And where I could show you that, this time we have to go into the company-sponsored shells node in the navigation pane. I would select the projects, the shell type. You can see here these are the projects, the shell instances that were created. I'll just open up the first one. And within this shell instance, this project, it has its own access control. And here is where you would also set permissions for users to use this project. As part of it as well, you also have the permissions for setting up the business processes that are specific to this project, this shell instance. So in terms of maintenance of permissions, the easiest way, or the two key ways of doing it, are through groups and shell templates. Now, the base product functionality comes with a preset number of groups. You can see them here. And these also come with preset defined permission sets. This is extremely handy because if you can imagine, without the base product, you would have to create all those permissions for each individual project, for each individual group. One thing to note is that these groups that I'm opening here within this user administration node are company level groups. So that is one set of group permissions that you would set. Obviously, one of the most important ones is at the shell level, and I did show you that very briefly. If I open up that same project, if we open up the user administration node for that project, you would actually include users into this project, and these users are created at the company level as part of company users here. And you would include them in at the shell and include them into shell level groups. Now these groups that you see are different to the groups that I showed you. They were at the company level. This is at shell level. The other key thing for administration setup and permissions is to use something called the shell templates. This is very, very useful. When a shell type has been set up, so not a top level shell, because there can only be one, but something like projects, you have the ability to create shell template. And in this case here, if you remember, we had the project shell type, which is where we created the projects. And in this case, we have their shell templates within Unifier that they call them project templates. So I can open this. This is part of the base product, but we did modify it slightly. And what this allows us, it gives us the ability to invite partner companies in. So that was set up by the site administrator, the partner companies. The partner companies then become available within the company workspace of this environment, and then we can invite these partner companies in to participate in these shells. Once they're in, you can then select the specific users from each of the partner companies. It has its own access control module where you can set up the permissions. Again, you have the users and groups for this particular shell template. You have business process setups, dashboard setups, gates, the resource manager, if that was to be included, any rules that are set up for the shell template, cost manager is also in, document manager and the schedule manager, and user-defined reports. Now this is all contained within the shell template, so you can create a specific type of template for specific types of projects, and it's all contained within this template, and you can then create projects using the template. And any changes that are made, or any changes that need to be made to any of these projects that have been created, can be made through the shell template, and then you can push out those changes to the projects. So I hope that's given you a little bit of an overview. I'd now like to actually quickly go into the modified GC RFI. Okay, here in this instance we have the ability to create the RFI, and we have the ability to select from two different workflows. The RFI is the original one that was the base product, but we've also now included a GC RFI, which has a whole different workflow, and that differs to the base product version. So this is good if you wanted to have a specific workflow for a particular client, or in this case for a particular regional office. I'll select this one. Okay, I'll quickly put in the title. Quickly put in a question. See that I'm running a little bit over schedule. I can select a vendor, which would be the subcontractor that's submitting the RFI. In this case, we'll choose Valley Forge Ironworker. Okay, I can attach the RFI that had been sent from the subcontractor. But what I'll do is I'll move it on for coordination, and this will be using a coordinator. I'll use the same user account, and I will forward this on. So now this is submitting it. I have to put the due date for the whole RFI workflow, so I'll just put it for a week. And I will send it. If I go to my collaboration, we can see that it's sent to me for coordination. I accept the task. Now we have different workflow actions. We can close out the RFI directly, we can cancel it, we could accept and submit for review, we could accept the answer straight to the design group to accept, or we could return for clarification. I'm just going to accept and submit for review. I'll select it to myself. Obviously you could send to Chris Atkinson at this point, who would be part of the design group, who would give the answer. And I will forward it on. Okay, we have received it again. I accept the task. For each step, you will get a unified generated email as well. So in this case, we have the options to return for clarification, close the RFI, cancel it, or answer the RFI. For the purposes now, I will say that it has been accepted. I will close out the RFI. What we can do here now is basically start the process of creating the potential change order, so we would select yes. Any answer document we would attach. I will send this on. And we should be receiving so that had now closed the RFI, and you can see here we have actually the potential change order that has been initiated now to be put through the workflow and completed. Okay, this concludes the demo. Over to you, Don. Sorry I overran a little bit. Thank you.
Don, I believe your sound is muted.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? All right,
Yes.
great. I have to figure out what that technical glitch was. We've gone over the time. We still got about 20 people left on. I did want to mention that the questions that came in, we'll be sending you all a log on that. I wanted to put this screen up. These are some events that are coming up that you may want to participate in. First up is Indian Wells AAC event in November 1st through 3rd, if you could make it. Hope to see you there. A couple of the questions that came up, someone asked about change management. Change management is set up in your business process workflows. And as Lynn just demonstrated, he was able to create a PCO as he closed out the RFI. And that's how the change management process could work. And you can build rules in there about what the follow-on document would be. There is no change management per se comes out of the box, but you create it through your workflows. Okay. There was a question about me referring to the cost breakdown structure in Unifier, because Unifier calls it the WBS. Like many cost-based systems, people think it's a WBS. It's actually a cost breakdown structure, and I was referring to it as a CBS, and that's actually going to change probably in the next release, where Primavera is going to change it to CBS so it doesn't confuse with the WBS in P6. There's a question on handling multiple projects and multiple people at the same time. There don't seem to be any limits. We've had multiple 2, 3, 4 people in one log in one project at the same time. This system is made for many users. Many users in a project, many users in a log. We haven't had any problems with that at all. So I want to thank you for attending this webinar. We did go a bit over with the technical part of it, and we'll be sending everyone a copy of the slides and a copy of the questions, and we welcome your comments. Thank you very much.